Well, you may have heard of the expression, the shot heard around the world from world history. Actually, it refers to the start of the American War of Independence. Today, we are going to talk about something slightly less momentous, the slap heard around the world. Welcome aboard to Finding Traction.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, before we get to such an important event, let me just say this. I want to invite you to check out the website bandofbrothers.care to find out more about the Finding Traction course that I teach, as well as information about the various groups that you can sign up for. All of our groups and the individual coaching use the material that I've written, and basically I take both individuals and a group on a journey together as we seek basically to break free from porn into a better life. I'm also in the process of starting an alumni group for the growing number of people now who have worked through the 52 weeks of the course, either individually or with an accountability partner or with one of our groups. So if you want more information on that or just about our groups in general, please email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Well, let's get back to the slap that was heard around the world. Yeah, I know in light of the more momentous and horrific events around our world, this is not something that will change world history, but it's certainly got our tongues wagging. Of course, I'm referring to the Oscars, where Will Smith marched up on stage and slapped Chris Rock across the face for insulting his wife, making fun of her health condition, and saying in no uncertain terms that Chris Rock would be better off if he quit talking about his wife. Now, of course, we live in an online fractious world, and so people love to immediately let their opinions be known, and there were camps that essentially immediately were drawn online over the incident and what people thought of it. Was Will Smith completely over the line? And this was a horrible thing that he did to our dearly beloved comic Chris Rock. Or did Chris Rock so cross the line by making fun of somebody with a health condition or disability, he essentially deserved everything he got? Now, I'm going to leave that important question hanging over you to wrestle with over these next days, weeks, months, even years, because I know that you will need to come to a settled conclusion, and that conclusion will, of course, affect the rest of your life. But it's just an event, but it was an event that people are talking about. Let me just say this: I do know that Will Smith has since apologized, and he said that what he did was wrong. But today I want to talk about the impulse that made Will Smith do what he did. Well, now you could say, well, obviously there was an impulse, but there certainly was no impulse control that Will Smith exercised in the moment. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, one of the things in our coaching groups, somebody brought up a term that's used in counseling circles, and the term is emotional dysregulation. We have used another term. Me and my wife have taught a John Gottman course for years to couples. We haven't done it over the last couple of years, but we did for like 10, 12 years. And the term that they use was the term flooding. And anybody who watched that event on TV would know that Will Smith essentially fit that category. He was emotionally dysregulated or flooded. Or to use another term, he saw red and responded accordingly. So I guess the question I would ask as we try to learn something is, what causes you to see red? And when you see red or you feel flooded, how do you respond to that? What steps do you take, or do you metaphorically or actually walk up on a stage, physically or verbally assault somebody? Do you act on the first thing that comes into your mind? Do you respond in kind when you're experiencing flooded emotions? Do you do things and say things and then regret it afterwards? I learned a simple rule which has saved my bacon many times as a leader. Whenever somebody sends me a message that causes me to see red or feel attacked, or question something that I feel is personal, I know what happens to my body. My heart rate starts elevating. I get warm and flushed. I start biting my tongue. I have no idea what that's about. And immediately I want to open up my laptop. Well, actually, usually my laptop's already open because I saw something they sent me. And I want to fire back a missile to defend myself, to push back and respond in kind. Now, I might not do it in all caps, but I guarantee that the person who receives my message back is going to hear it in that light. So the rule that I'm referring to is, whenever you feel that emotion and you want to immediately respond, defend yourself, or post something on social media, all you Facebook people out there, you are feeling energized. It's a fancy word for upset, animated, agitated, flooded, emotionally dysregulated. My rule is this: if at all possible, wait 24 hours before you respond. It's amazing what happens when I wait 24 hours to my thought process. I begin to think things through in a little more nuanced way, a kinder, gentler way. I become more moderate. I start thinking about what I want my response what I want my message to accomplish, rather than it simply making me feel better in the very, very short term. I recently had an exchange like this with somebody in my family. We had a text exchange. I'd sent them a podcast I thought would be a great podcast to talk about, but it didn't go well. It's safe to say that the person receiving it felt attacked. Now, that wasn't my intent, but that's how they received it. So I sent a short message back clarifying what I had meant to say. It wasn't responded to. And so I realized, I think we've got a problem. And I was going to send another one back, but then I decided to wait. I waited 24 hours, and instead of sending them yet another message, I called them in person. There's something about the sound of your voice. Ideally, face-to-face is probably best. It wouldn't work in this situation, but a phone call was next best. And over the phone, hearing one another's voices, we were able to diffuse the intensity of the conversation. Now, it didn't mean that we saw eye to eye about everything we were talking about, but I was able to respond from an emotionally regulated place, and our conversation didn't further inflame the disagreement. The issue was, and the 24 hours was really good, it helped me think through what is most important to me. And what was most important to me was our relationship, not being right. So I guess that's my first takeaway I have from the Oscar event. I asked the guys I coach, things like, well, what causes you to become flooded? What causes you to have that emotional response? And what do you do when that's the case? Do you run to porn to feel safer? Do you further damage your relationships either by what you say or what you do? It's interesting. This is from some of our John Gottman course that we have taught. When you feel flooded, we'll use that term here. And this is certainly true of men. It's also true for women, especially those who've experienced trauma or abuse. But let's just talk about men here. Whenever men feel flooded, what happens is, let's say you're in a conversation, you feel your emotions, your anger rising, all of those experiences. What happens is our thought processes become narrowed. We can't think clearly. We feel trapped. It's kind of a fight or flight response. And so very often we teach men, whenever you're feeling flooded in a conversation, it's better for you to return to it at a later time. We tell wives, don't hold your husbands in a conversation when this is the case, when they're feeling flooded. Allow for a timeout. A timeout's helpful for us men. We can perhaps have some space, think through an issue, think about what we want to say or how we want to say it. We can go for a walk, or we can go out and hit the punching bag in the shed. Whatever that is, wail on it for a while. Now, let me also say I recognize that withdrawal is also a danger sign in the relationship. I'm not talking about where one party, as a matter of course, doesn't want to talk about things. But we say to men, if you are calling a time out because you're flooded, it's only helpful if there's a time in. So we say if you call a time out, according to the rules, we teach guys, you say you have to call a time in the next 24 to 48 hours. Otherwise, you're just using a timeout as a way of avoiding conflict or having a difficult discussion, and that is not valid. So I think this whole Oscar event, it really helped me think through, and it's a great conversation to talk about flooding, emotional dysregulation. How do you respond, for good or ill? You say, well, what else could Will Smith have done? Well, I don't know. Maybe he could have taken Jada's hand, I think it's her name. They could have just got up and walked down the aisle and left the building. Or he could have, not that he knew he was going to win, but he could have waited until he won the Best Actor, and then he could have said something even classier. I don't know. But the bottom line is, it's pretty clear that this was just an impulse, and he responded in a way that he regretted later. I think there's other things that we can do when we feel flooded. One of them is just to be curious, why am I feeling this way? What wound is being surfaced here? Usually there's some event that's happened which is deeper. What story does this remind me of? Or when this happens, I feel just like I did when I was younger. When my wife has that tone of voice or she says that certain thing, I have this emotional response. And when you're curious, you can begin to make those connections. You see, if you don't make those connections, you're simply prey for the next time a similar situation happens, and you just pray to being triggered again. And you start saying, you know what, I've noticed in certain situations I have this response. I wonder what's going on. I have this emotional reaction whenever my wife has that tone of voice, or whenever the in-laws come over, or whenever the kids lose something, or whatever that is. It's telling me something about myself. If you don't understand, you may not understand simply because you're not being curious enough. And then all you have left is the victim card, which is, why do these things keep happening to me? Why do I always feel this way? So I guess that's my first takeaway from this is understand yourself, or at least have a Denzel Washington over on the side that can help you understand yourself. But we all don't have somebody like that. All right. Well, let me flip to the other side for a second over this Oscar incident and Will Smith's actions. There were those, and for those who said to Will Smith, bravo, good job. I understand some of that response to Will Smith. There is something about the old-fashioned idea of chivalry, or the old idea of defending someone's honor. Whether you agree with his actions or not, he was defending his wife's honor. He was being protective. And I know a lot of people didn't like when he got up later after winning the Best Actor, and he started talking about his role, King Richard, and the role he played, which essentially Richard Williams was the father of Serena and Venus Williams. And he basically rationalized his actions by saying, I was just being protective of my family, just like Richard Williams was. Well, again, you might say that was a rationalization, but there's something to say about this idea of protecting your family, protecting your wife. Yes, that might not be the way you do it. But, in a world where somebody's being attacked, do you just stand by? If you're in a conversation and somebody's being bullied or made fun of, do you just do nothing? His wife was clearly uncomfortable with this line of joke. It wasn't the first time Chris Rock had gone after her. And then he doubled down on his joke. And you could say, at what point does a man rise up and say, no more? You don't talk to my wife that way. In the old days, there would have been a duel or a fist fight or something. And you say, oh, we're far more civilized than that. But here's the point. There's something in a man's heart that rises up and wants to protect his wife, his family. A man wants to basically say, I want my wife to feel safe, and I watch out for her. And when there's danger, I respond. A man is, an honorable man says, I would be willing to put my life on the line to protect my wife and kids. Don't diss my wife. I just won't stand for it. You don't do that. Okay. I know I'm really getting off the rabbit trail here, but the point is this. We talked a lot, about why we want to be porn free. What's our big why? Why do we want to live a life free of porn? Especially being a married guy, or you could just be somebody looking forward to marriage. One of the reasons in this whole palette of reasons we have is that we want to be an honorable guy for our wives. In one sense, we want to protect our wives. We know this stuff hurts her. You say, I'm done seeing the tears in my wife's eyes or the look of hurt on her face. I don't like hurting my wife or the damage it does. I don't like being a willing participant to that. And I think guys, one of the reasons guys use to get free from porn is they go, I want to feel better about myself as a protector, somebody that's a safe man for my wife. You say, I don't like the stuff that porn brings into my house. At some point, I realize it's a threat to my marriage, and I want to finally stand up to this thing that's taking away my lunch money. I'm going to protect my family. Well, maybe you think that has nothing to do with smacking a guy across the face. But there's also a part of me that says there's probably more than a few women out there who may be feeling, I wish my husband felt that strongly about me and protecting me. So, there you go. If I have sorely offended you, you can send me an email at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. But let me just say, if you are emotionally dysregulated, I ask you to wait 24 hours before doing so. See you next time.